Okay, so now we start with the main part, is the study and the preparation tips. This comes from all the last 10 years. I run a mentoring program too here in Latin America, where we prepare people from Cisco partners, Cisco customers, even Cisco employees for the CCIEs. Okay, so first part. This is the first part. I think it's the most important part, and we most of the time people forget this part. You need to get support from your family, because as you know, CCIE involves a lot of time to prepare, so a lot of study time. So you will spend time where you will not be with your family. You will not be playing with your kids or with your girlfriend, your boyfriend. So if you don't have support from your family, you will probably make yourself a hard track to go to the CCIE, because you will first have the stress for the exam, but then the stress from your family asking why you study so much or why you're not with them. So please, if you go for a CCIE, speak with your family. Explain them what is the CCIE, because if you're not from the networking industry, maybe they don't know what CCIE means. They don't know what is the CCIE. So try to explain them what is the CCIE, what it will bring you, and at the end, everybody will get something good from the CCIE, maybe from the extra money, in fact. So get support from your family. That's very important. Talk to them. Just ensure they understand what you're doing, okay? Because I've seen many people divorce because of the CCIE, because they don't know, they don't get the support from their wife, husband, okay? So ensure you have this part before even starting to study. Don't trust rumors. I remember when back in 2000, when I was going for a CCIE, it was a 2-day lab exam. There were no way to study more than the Cisco.com webpage with the configuration guides and command guides. So a lot of people were telling me, like, I was studying with a guy, and he told me, CCIE is so tough, you will never pass. You have to be like semi-god mode to be able to pass the lab. So I was very scared. I was very scared by the lab exam. And when I got there, I was like not at 100%, because I was scared even before seeing the lab itself. So don't trust rumors. Just go your way, study, prepare fine, and don't believe that everything that they say about the lab, okay? So you don't get surprised, or you don't lose your balance when you get to the lab and just like you spend like half an hour within the lab trying to wake up. So don't believe that. Don't trust what they say. Just study and focus on the lab, and everything will be fine. Then something else very important is schedule the lab exam. Okay, so when you start to study, schedule the lab exam. Why? Because I've seen many people do this mistake. They study like 5 years and they never go to the lab. So it's better to schedule a lab exam, because you have a target. So for example, you start to study, you say, okay, in 8 months I should be ready for my CCIE. So if you schedule the lab, you know that you have to go there. So it will help you to study, it will help you to plan your studies, and it will help you to be successful too. Because if you don't schedule the lab, what happens is you start to study and then, no, I'm not ready. So maybe in 3 months, I'll schedule the lab. And then in 3 months, you're not ready. But you're never ready. You cannot know everything about everything. So you're never 100% ready for CCIE. But scheduling the lab, I think, is very important, so you don't postpone the lab all the time. I have some colleagues here. They've been saying they will go for the CCIE lab for the last 2 years, and they've never been to the CCIE lab. So scheduling the lab is very important. Okay. So when you start to study, ensure you save your time. That's something I've seen. I've seen people study so much, like 10 hours a day for 6 months, maybe a year. Not every day for sure, but they spend so much time. So save your time and use your time wisely so you don't study like crazy. And if you do so, you'll see that you spend most of your time studying things that you already know. So ensure you save your time and you use it wisely. Don't spend too much time on something that you don't, but something you already know. And that's very important because a lot of people studying this, they ask me, okay, I don't know, I need like 20 hours a day to study for a CCIE. No, you don't need 20 hours. You need a few hours maybe, and not maybe not every day. Well, it depends on everyone. Every person is different. So some people need to study more, some people need to study less. Find the right balance for you, and this will balance with your family time. Okay. So save your time. Time is key in the CCA preparation. So ensure you plan it right. Then have an efficient plan of studies. Here we have different schools. For example, the way I study, I'm going to share it with you right now. The way I study is not really the same as most of my colleagues do. What I do, exactly I do it like that, just like the diagram here. I take the blueprint and then I split into parts. Like I say, okay, the blueprints, they are like 5 main topics. So first of all, what I try to do, I try to study every topic in a separate way. So I don't study the whole thing all together. Because if I do that, I get a bit lost because you get a bit of this, a bit of that, and you don't have a clear idea of any of the subtopics. So read the blueprint, find the main sections in the blueprint, and then plan your studies based on that. So let's say I'm studying right now for data center. So let's take a real example. In the data center, you have the Nexus part, you have the UCS part, and you have the MDS part. So you have like 3 main blocks. Okay. So when I started to study, I didn't make like a huge lab with Nexus and MDS and UCS all together and try to make it work. No, I take Nexus, I see all that within the Nexus, like for routing and OTV and stuff. And then I do the same for UCS and then for MDS. Okay, so try to be efficient. What will happen is when you have all the parts all together, like when you have understood all the parts, you can start to bring them all together and make like big labs. When, for example, let's say boot from SAN from UCS. So you need the UCS, you may need the Nexus, you may need the Nexus, sorry, and then you have the NDS. Okay, so from the boot from SAN, you would need all the 3 parts. Okay, so this applies for all the tracks. All the tracks you will see topics that will need all the blocks together. If it's collaboration, if it's routing and switching, you may need some MPLS core, and then you need some BGP on top of that, and maybe some IGP on the behind the Ps. So to test that, you would need to bring all the subparts together to test something. Okay, but I always try not to build huge labs. Why so? I have friends that when they study, they build like huge lab, like 15 or 20 devices. And what happens? They spend like 20% of their time configuring something they already know. Okay, so if you study, you don't have time to spare on things you already know. You should be studying things that are new to you. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say for service provider, you want to try carrier supporting carrier. Okay, so try to bring on the table only the devices you need to build a small topology with carrier supporting carrier. Let's say 7 or 8 devices, and that's it. And work on carrier supporting carrier. Okay, but I don't know if it's clear the idea, but this way it helped me a lot. First of all, what it helps is it helps you to understand deep the every topic in the blueprint, and that's very important. Then you can join all the topics and bring and make a big lab if you feel comfortable with that. I remember when I passed my routing and switching in 2000, I had only three 2500 routers. I don't know if you know the 2500 routers, but those are very small, and one of them didn't have enough. They didn't have enough memory to run BGP. So the first time I configured BGP in my life was in the lab. So, well, that shouldn't be like that. Today, this should not happen. But so the main idea is I had only three routers, so I had to find a way to study BGP with OSPF, redistribution, EIGRP, RIP, and all the exotic protocols on top of that. So this made me find this way to study. And I still study like that. All the 6 CCIEs I passed, I did the same every time. I study separately every part, and then when I feel confident with every topic, I start to join them to make like a bigger topologies. But I try to avoid making like huge topologies with 20 devices. Okay, but you can do that if you feel comfortable with that. Then you need to find a practice lab. I never start to study CCIE if I don't know where I can practice. Today you have great tools like Cisco modeling labs. You have some providers that can help you booking some labs for practice. You have the PEC, like a partner e-learning connection, where you have great labs too, where you can practice topologies or maybe some protocols, whatever, that's part of the CCIE. So if you don't have a practice lab, don't even start to study. Okay, it's a waste of time. That's the first thing I do when I start to study CCIE. I need to know how I will practice. Well, luckily for data center right now, UCS, there's a UCS simulator. It's very good. So you can have it running on VMware, and then you can have the full UCS with a fabric interconnect and stuff like that. For every lab, you should have a practice lab. If you don't have it, don't even start to study. And then something very important, and I think most of the people that study, they don't get this point, and I will tell you why it's very critical. You need to understand what you're doing. So if you have 10 years old kid, you need to know, you should be able to explain him what is BGP, what it's used for. Okay, so understanding, be sure you can explain what you study to someone that is not in networking world. Okay, so what happened? Why is this point so important? Because when you get to the CCIE lab, they will test you on that. They will test you on how much have you understood of OSPF areas and I don't know, virtual links and authentication, the types of authentication, the type of redistribution, the routing loops and stuff like that. So you need to be sure that you understood exactly, because in the lab they will test you on this point. They'll test you on if you know, okay? But knowing is understanding. So be sure you can explain everything, okay, with simple words. Because if, for example, I tell you, oh, okay, I don't know, tell me what's the difference between multiple instance spanning tree, rapid spanning tree, and let's say common spanning tree, traditional spanning tree. If you cannot tell me in like 5 minutes what's the difference, well, you need to study a bit more. Because don't focus on the bit and byte. That's not the point here. Focus on the concept. You need to know, you need to understand what the mechanisms, how it works. For example, OSPF. For example, EIGRP, BGP, I don't know, MPLS, LDP, everything. You need to know how it works. You don't need exactly to know what's the handshake session, how does it look like. You need to know the way it works. Okay, just don't forget, this applies to all the tracks. If you understand the way it works and you can explain it to someone else that is not part of networking industry, I think you're pretty good shape for the CCIE. Okay, that's a point that most of the people I've seen forget. They say, oh, okay, yeah, practice a lot. I do like 10 hours a day, OSPF configurations. Okay. So, and what happens if you do this or that? Or, oh, okay, they don't know, because if I take them out of the track, of the comfort track, I'd say, they are, they, as they don't know the mechanisms, they're lost, because it's not about a cooking recipe. CCIE will never be about that. CCIE is about testing if you've understood enough to be able to solve a problem or a configuration if they take you a bit out of this common configuration, let's say. So ensure that you understand. This is the key. Sometimes I spend a lot of time because there's something that is part of the blueprint, but I don't understand. Okay, I don't get the idea. I know what it's for, what it's meant to do, but I don't understand how it does it. So read again. I don't know, find on Google, on Cisco.com. Try to find some config guides. Maybe it can help you. Try to find somewhere when you can it can explain. I remember something very funny. I'll give you an example about that. There's a feature in storage that's called IVR, inter-vSAN routing. This IVR, I've seen a few people, they can configure it well, you know. They know how to configure IVR. In fact, it's just a few commands. It's very easy to configure, but they don't understand the way it works. So if they put you in a situation where you have like a tricky IVR configuration, well, you're lost because you don't understand what are the mechanisms behind the IVR. So don't forget it. Just don't learn how to configure something. Learn the way it works, okay? Till now, we're fine. If you have questions, please go for, in the chat, you can ask me. I'll try to answer live. Okay. So till now, we're fine. If you want, you can put a hand. Okay.
And they're
okay.
and they're also coming through on the question panel too, which you may or may not have.
Oh, okay. So, it was not open. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. There's some questions that are coming through, but anyway, just so you know.
Okay. So I just think, yeah, this session is about all the CCIEs. If you don't, okay. Okay. I see some questions. I try to just right now, just a small break for the questions. I see if the proctors are allowed to induce problems during the lab exam. Well, officially, no. Maybe, I don't know. The question is, this question I cannot answer. As far as I know, they don't do that. But if you see something else, well, this may happen. So if you don't have anywhere to study, well, try to find your way. I remember when I studied for a security track, there were the web VPN. I don't know if it was the Web 3000, if I remember right. And I couldn't have one to study. So I tried to find a lab on the partner e-learning connection. And then what I did is I just used their lab, but not configuring what I was asked for. I just configured what I needed to check. I wanted to check some things for my CCIEs, so for my CCIE security. So what I did, I just used the partner e-learning connection with a web VPN 3000, and then from there I configured what I wanted to check. So this may be a way. That's a great resource, partner e-learning connection, when you can find some devices maybe you don't have in your lab. Okay, so on your building your lab for preparation, today most of your lab can be virtualized, more for routing and switching, like service provider. You can virtualize a lot of that. I think for voice too, for collaboration, you can have a lot virtualized. For let's say a data center, you can also virtualize a lot. So try to use it as much as you can. I remember there's something called the Cisco Modeling Labs. This is a tool when you run a real iOS image or real XR image, and you even have an NXOS image for Nexus 7K, when you can run them on your laptop, maybe with extra RAM. And then you have like a lab where you can test maybe 80% of what's in the lab blueprint. Okay. And okay, we have a good question. The syllabus for CCIE is quite vast. What what in your tips help the most for remembering or not forgetting already understood stuff? Okay, that's a good question. First, if you understand something, well, it will last for 10 years. Okay, if you learn something like just like a cooking recipe, you'll forget it in 3 weeks. Okay, so that's why the previous slide here on understanding is very important, because if you understood something, it will stay forever almost. And then what I do when I prepare for CCIE, I do it in short time. So I don't plan my CCIE for the next 5 years. It's in 6 months or something like that. So this way I don't have to study the same 2 or 3 times, because if you spend too much time studying or it takes too much time, you will forget maybe some comments or some things that you studied like 6 months ago. And something else I do, I have like some short notebooks. I have one for every track, just right here. And what I do on those books, I just write what I think is key for every topic, or what I think I would forget. Let's say click somewhere to enable something. I say, oh, this I will forget. So I just write down in my notebook. You can do it in something else like Evernote or whatever you want. But I do it by hand, like handwriting, and I do some diagrams. But I don't write about everything. I just write what I think I would forget, or what I think is a bit tricky in a specific topic. So when I study, I have this with me, and I write down what I think, oh, this is very important. I have to remember that. And what I do when I'm going for the lab, when I'm traveling to the lab, I reopen in the plane this notebook, and I read everything. So I remember, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Don't forget, when you need to do that, don't forget to configure this command. Okay, so that's the way I do it. Maybe you have some another way to keep track of what you're learning, but that's the way I do it, and it's been working pretty good for me. So a short notebook, I write only important stuff in there, and when I'm going to the lab, I read it again, and I read it again, and maybe usually it helps a lot. Okay. So something else, be prepared to fail. What is that? Because a lot of people think they will go to the CCIE and pass first attempt. This happens, yes, it does, but most of the time you will fail. Okay, but I think it's part of the CCIE itself. I know that I learn more through the CCIE process of failing, maybe sometimes that during my study. Don't forget, CCIE is about proving yourself that you're expert level in a technology. So they challenge you so hard in the lab that for sure there's something you were not prepared enough for the lab. So between lab exams, you will study more something, so you will increase your knowledge. So when you end your CCIE exam, you will know more than before beginning the CCIE. I have a good example of a friend of mine. He just passed the data center track, and he's very good in data center. And he told me that. He said, it's crazy. He passed on the 3rd attempt, and he told me, I've learned so much through the process. And I think that's very important. When you go to the CCIE, you get, after passing, you feel so good because you've learned a lot. You've reached a great milestone in your career, maybe, and it's part of the exam, I think. So be prepared to fail. There's nothing wrong about that, and with that, failure is success if we learn from it. So don't forget that. Be prepared to fail, and it's part of the lab. I really hope you pass on the first attempt. Okay, we all want that.